Hello everyone, Gebatron here. The channel has recently passed the 2,000 subscriber mark and it still blows my mind. That's a buttload more than the 20 subscribers I ever expected, so I want to say thank you to all of you who have subscribed, watched, shared, commented, and so on. It's been a lot of fun so far and I hope to keep this going for a long time. I really do mean it. Being able to make video game related content that is helping people learn more and helping people enjoy themselves more is a lot of fun, and you have all made it feel rewarding as well. Thank you. In celebration, I decided to do a simple AMA or Ask Me Anything style video. These questions came straight from you guys, so thanks for participating. And if you missed out on that post, don't worry. Put any questions you may have in the comments and I'll get to them as soon as I can. In no particular order, our first question comes from Knowledge of Barbarossa. You said something about a live stream before, and I was wondering that if in the future viewers can play with you. So KB is referring to a poll I presented a while back where I said I was kind of interested in streaming, and the poll was designed to gauge how well that would be received. The main thing holding me back from doing this currently is that I really don't have a super reliable schedule, so to answer the question, yes, I would love to play with viewers or subscribers in live streams, but not having a set schedule would make the logistics of this a little challenging. However, I'm sure I'd be able to use Discord or some other means to manage this. I would like to get a couple, 2 or 3 streams under my belt first just to make sure the technical side of things are working smoothly, and I'd like to get comfortable with doing it first. But to answer the question, yes, if I do start streaming, I would absolutely play with subscribers. I think that would be a lot of fun and a great way to interact with people who are helping support this little channel. Until then, though, you can try to hook up with me via the GamePunch.net Discord. I'll put links to all that in the description, and we'll talk more about communities here in a bit. Thanks for the question, KB, and I hope to play with you soon. Swisshost asks, are you playing Hell Let Loose with your wife, or is she just your test dummy? Great question. My partner, Fairingtale, makes a lot of appearances in the Hell Let Loose videos, and sometimes she takes some abuse, from getting shot in the legs to getting grenades dropped on her. Not glamorous work. No, my wife does not actually play Hell Let Loose. We have played some LEGO Star Wars together in the past, but it's generally not something she's interested in. Her work requires her to have a few laptops on hand though, which works out really well for me, even though her laptops are far from powerful. Sometimes it's like playing a slideshow. I purchased the game twice, and at least so far, every time you have seen her, it's just been me playing with myself. mstrstrawx asks, and I'm sorry if I mess up your guys' names, but mstrstrawx asks, what do you think of Hell Let Loose coming to console? I've heard that in the PC community, people have mixed feelings about it. Mixed feelings is probably an understatement. I think a lot of the PC crowd reacted the way they did because they weren't aware that the console stuff was being handled by a separate team, and were afraid that the PC development would stall, so they could focus on the console version. So they had strong opinions based on misinformation, similar to American politics. Others thought the game was going to be quote-unquote dumbed down for console players, and that's just kind of an elitist and unproductive point of view. After all, just because someone is playing on console doesn't mean they don't love video games, or even this video game, as much as you or I do. It just means their situation may be different for one reason or another. So I personally think it's good that this game is going to be available to a larger audience. That means more money in the pot, more potential for content, more, game longevity, etc. Having said all that, I do personally have a reservation or two for the future of the game in this regard. First is from a technical aspect. PC hardware advances simply outpace console upgrades. So my question then becomes, say in, 3 or 4 years, are PC Hell Let Loose players going to be shorted on possible advancements due to it not also being something that could be introduced on console? Say an engine upgrade that makes some new feature available. Let's just say real-time impact craters become something that could be introduced, but the consoles would no longer have the computing power to do that and stay at 60 frames per second, while PCs would be able to do this. Will we not get impact craters across the board? Will just the PC version get them? How committed are the developers to keeping parity between the two versions of the game? This is all highly speculative, but those are some questions I'd like answered that have yet to be asked because people are focusing on the present, and there are no issues like this presently. Second is, who has the larger voice when it comes to further development? If console sales outpace PC sales, will the console players have greater leverage when it comes to feedback? Is the game going to shift ever so slightly to be a more console-friendly experience in regards to, like settings and communication? I think those are the things that I have mixed feelings about, and it's not like I don't think those questions have answers or those problems don't have solutions, but I don't think most of the community is asking those questions and is instead being reactionary. I think more tactical shooters like this coming to console is ultimately a good thing, but yeah, I do have some mixed feelings. A lot of people who got on board during Kickstarter, beta, and early access were build a PC game, so I think people just want clear answers and they want to know that their time and efforts in helping form the game up to this point haven't been undermined. Good question. About 641 Ninjas says, do you think the often negative side of Hell Let Loose portrayed on the subreddit is fair? Boy, if you think the subreddit is bad, then you should check out the Steam forums. To give the short answer, I'd say that the negative stuff you see is mostly not fair and put up by people who aren't really doing anything to facilitate or emulate the change they actually want. I like to think that most people can see through that type of negativity. I mean, if you read some of those posts on Reddit or Steam or even on the Discord, and then you go play a few hours, you'll see there's a pretty big disconnect and that this is one of the best overall communities out there. Especially in the community-run servers where negativity, racism, team killing, all that stuff is squashed pretty quickly. Now, there is a place for constructive criticism, as the game isn't perfect, don't get me wrong. There are flaws, and newer players can struggle with understanding all of the tiny details of the mechanics, so that leads to some frustration, which then gets expressed on these different social media platforms, but this is to be expected. And the larger community will likely get a little more toxic as the game grows, but hopefully we can keep that mitigated. I think that the subreddit is actually the best place for people to go for community interaction versus like the official Discord, but I do believe the Discord is a better place to get info from the devs themselves. And other than the dev briefs, I would advise people to just steer clear of the Steam forums, period. So again, no, I don't think that the negativity on Reddit especially will have a negative impact on that stuff. When people are negative for the sake of being negative, those posts are usually countered pretty thoroughly and downvoted enough that people can see what's really up. But it is something to keep your eye on, for the future. Thanks for the question. Ollibolliskru, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Ollibolliskru asks, are you in a Hell Let Loose community or have you ever thought about joining one? Why or why not? I am a member of the Game Punch gaming community that runs the Glows Battlegrounds server, and I put links to the Game Punch stuff in the description to all my videos. But that's actually fairly recent. For a long time I wasn't, and I didn't want to be in a community. First, believe it or not, I'm normally very antisocial and introverted. Second was for a long time I thought it might actually hurt my YouTube channel. I always saw my channel as kind of the blue collar channel that wasn't keeping any information secret, or wasn't withholding certain things to the benefit of my community. So if I knew it, then you knew it as well. Another thing was I just don't have tons of time and was concerned that being a community member would have some obligations that would eat up some time, and I would just have no time remaining. Well, none of those concerns were warranted. I won't bore you with how I became a Game Punch member, but it was an excellent decision and I highly recommend to any Hell Let Loose player to join one. Being in a community will give you potential access to the admin cam, VIP slots if you are short on time, active admins will keep the trash and negativity out of the servers. Then there is just the familiarity that comes with playing with people you know, or you will get to know, and the benefits of communication that come along with that. But the thing that I find to be a big benefit that I did not expect when joining was the discussions that happen surrounding the game and the health of the server. These discussions are always respectful and productive, even if there are disagreements, which there often are. For example, we were recently having a discussion about a potential rule change on the server. Everyone was able to voice their opinion and give reasons as to why they thought the way they did, and others were free to challenge those ideas, and no one was calling anyone an idiot. Everyone was respectful. Some people changed their minds even, after hearing other people's opinions, and it was just a really positive conversation that will likely lead to a better experience for all players in the Game Punch server. If this same or a similar discussion would have happened, say, on the Steam forums, it would have likely gotten bogged down by negative comments and unproductive comments. I remember one time I went in the feedback channel of the official Discord to suggest that the amount of ammo for the MG roll be reduced slightly, and the next 20 comments were just people calling me an idiot and telling me how stupid my idea was. There were a couple intelligent responses, but no real productive conversation, at least, was taking place. I'm not saying this to discourage you from giving feedback, directly to the devs via the Discord, but merely to point out that the interactions you're going to have in a clan or community are going to be much more positive. So yeah, I am a Game Punch member. A lot of good discussion, a lot of variety and gameplay approaches, a lot of game knowledge being shared. Another nice thing about Game Punch specifically is that while there is a dedicated group of Hell Let Loose players, it is also a wider gaming community. So if you want to play some other games with Game Punch members, you can do that too. In addition, there's channels where you can discuss music, food. You can play fantasy football there with some people if that's your thing. I'll leave all the links to the Game Punch stuff in the description, so feel free to check us out. But even if it isn't our community, I highly recommend joining one of the many other great Hell Let Loose communities. Thanks for the question. Gregory asks, what's your favorite Hell Let Loose map? So let me just start off by saying that I like all the maps. Even my least favorite map is still a good map. But I also appreciate the differences in these maps and welcome the different approaches that they all can require. Hill 400 is my least favorite map, by the way, not because it's bad, but because I'm just terrible at forest fighting and the different elevations make it even more difficult for me. I probably perform the best on the French hedgerow maps, so Saint Mary-Glisse and Saint Marie-du-Mont. My top 3 favorites are probably Foy, Carentan, and Purple Heart Lane. I like Foy because it's a winter map, currently the only winter map. I like how it lends itself well to a combined arms approach with plenty of open areas, but also some trees to move through and even some urban elements. I really like the mood and unique feel to Purple Heart Lane, which I know is unpopular, but I like how the main road is important even if there aren't any strong points along it. I like the unique choke point nature of the map, and I just feel like I'm actually there when playing Purple Heart Lane. Like I can feel the rain falling. And you don't see it as often anymore, so it currently has a bit of that novel feel to it as well. If I had to pick just one though, I think I'd go with Carentan. I really dig the urban stuff. Nothing beats setting up an MG42 in the 3rd story of a partially ruined building, and cutting off an entire angle of approach, or hopping from rubble to rubble as you advance. It's also an interesting map for armor, as you need to work with infantry if you're moving through the city itself, but there is still plenty of room to operate outside the city as well. But like I said, I don't dislike any map in the game so far, and I really appreciate how unique they all are. What are your favorite maps and why? Make sure to comment, and thank you, Gregory, for the question. Thijs Molenaar asks, how do you see the communication and leadership elements of Hell Let Loose translate into everyday life? It can be hard to compare this because one is a game and one is people's real lives, but it's still interesting to explore. So my job outside of YouTube is railroading, and for many years I worked as part of a crew that built and maintained railroad tracks. A couple of those years I was the acting foreman of the group, and I did actually bring a lot of those lessons I learned from doing that into Hell Let Loose. The main thing that I can see, similar between the two is how morale is handled. Keeping people positive and excited can be difficult, but it pays off. Focusing on the solution to a problem is way more helpful than dwelling on the problem. We've all been in that squad where everyone just complains about how nothing is going right and how bad the blueberries are. But if someone isn't there to shift that conversation out of the mud, A, you're not going to overcome the problem, and B, no one is going to have fun. Another thing that I kind of brought from real life is teaching over telling. Letting people know why you are doing things the way you're doing them and letting them in on the longer term plan allows them to participate. So you can say, go to the move marker, or you can say, we need to go to the move marker, build a garrison there, and then we'll turn south and push through the towns towards the objective. It sounds trivial, but it helps people feel more involved and it allows them to think more abstractly. They can react to your plan and give more input. Respecting their point of view is also important. Like I say in this video here, just because you are an SL doesn't mean you always have the best ideas. Many times at work, I'd say, hey, let's do things, this certain way, and then let's do another this certain way. But then someone would propose a different approach, and if it was a good idea, we did it. Sometimes even if there wasn't much of a difference, It helps people feel respected and involved, and those people work harder, they feel better about themselves and the work, and they feel like a part of a team instead of just a cog in a machine. I can't tell you how many times an engineer has asked me for supplies, as support, to build, say, a munitions node, because that's what we were lowest on. Then I'll say something like, hey, can you build a manpower node first? That way I'll be able to give you more supplies faster. And then I'll explain the whole cooldown mechanic. And they'll respond like a kid on Christmas morning because they didn't know about the cooldown benefit. I could have just said, build manpower first. But through teaching, instead of just telling, they learn something new. They'll feel empowered. They will be more likely to help you in the future. There is just no downside to that approach. So those are just a couple of things that I think can be applied in both real life and Hell Let Loose leadership positions. What about you? That was a fun question. Vodka Amas says, we are learning so much from you. Who have you learned from? The main ways I learn about the game is through the dev briefs, change logs, and patch notes. Following all that stuff keeps me more or less on the cutting edge of what's changing as far as mechanics and stuff like that and what's to come. I recommend that all Hell Let Loose players do this as well. It will greatly reduce your learning curve. It's even one of my tips in this video. But sometimes I do learn things in other ways. I think Pterodactyl has good content for this. He just made a video recently that clarified how loud footsteps are and at what distances you can hear those footsteps, which is good. He also does some videos that show the details of some of the weapon ballistics. Those are always good. Das Altberg had a video a while back where he shows that being near your squad leader and medic helps to reduce the game's suppression effect. I think a lot of people learn something new with that one. Every once in a while I'll learn something new via the subreddit. Like I recently learned that recon planes don't detect recon squads. You can check that video out here, but yeah, like I said earlier, I think the subreddit is a good place for community interaction. There's also a podcast/video series I like called Hell Let's Talk over at Esprit Decor Gaming. I probably mispronounced that. I don't necessarily learn a lot of new things about game mechanics, but it's good for hearing other opinions and different points of view about certain aspects of the game. The two hosts of that show are really knowledgeable and they play well against each other. One is more serious while the other is a little more cavalier about their approach to the game, and they have a lot of guests on, from Kickstarters to Hell Let Loose artists and content creators to people with knowledge on weapons and the history of World War II. It's a good show and it's fun to watch. I think Fresh Baked Goods has good content. You can learn a lot of good armor techniques, especially there. So that's where I'm spending some of my time learning about the game. I'll leave some links to those videos and channels in the description so you can check them out for yourself. Good question, thanks. Charles Whitman asks, what would you add, what would you change, and what would you remove from the game? What would I add? I'd like to see a more realistic ammunition management system and respawns not giving you your full loadout back. I'd really like to see this at least in a PTE someday. I really doubt we ever will, but that's what I want, to at least see how it would affect gameplay. And then I think things like barrel changes could be introduced for MGs, including armor MGs. As it stands now, I think that barrel changes would be a disconnect from the way that all the other weapons are handled, but if everyone had to manage their ammo and resupply at boxes, then I think the gameplay would slow just enough to make the barrel change mechanic viable again. For me, it's just really weird playing a World War II shooter that's trying to be relatively authentic and, squad-based with all the communication and stuff and tactical without having a more sincere ammo management system. Nothing takes me out of the game more than an AT guy who shoots his rockets and then just hits redeploy over and over and over to get more rockets. I don't think that's fun or what the devs really intended either. So that's what I'd add, at least to test it out. What would I change? Right now, I'd probably change how nodes and resources work. Currently, there is no risk reward with the nodes, so most people just build them as far back as possible, which is easy and quick, and then change roles just to get the XP. and people always overlook or just don't know about the cooldown bonuses of the nodes, so that part of the game, that benefit of the nodes is just wasted there too. So then you're gaining so many resources that the commander role becomes more of an algebra problem than a making tough decisions problem. Resources are just too abundant, which is leading to boring commander play. You used to have to make those tough decisions. There used to be times where it was better to have medium armor on the field rather than no armor at all, and you couldn't afford a tiger or a jumbo. So do you wait another 5 minutes, or do you get armor support as fast as possible? That decision has been replaced with only spawn heavy every 10 minutes because there are just so many resources that you can do that. What's more important, 2 recon planes or 1 blind bombing run? Well, now you don't have to think about it because you just use all them as soon as they're available. In my opinion, the node and resource systems need to be either rebalanced or reworked. That's what I would change. What would I remove? People are going to hate me for this, but I think I would remove the respawn system. Not the spawn system, the respawn system. Or at least limit it in some way. This kind of ties in with what I was saying earlier here. I don't like that you're able to just respawn simply to get more ammo, and I also think it's bad that you can use respawning to traverse the map. I think if you did this, there would be some bad consequences, like team killing would definitely increase, so you'd have to counter that in some way. And there are those times where you accidentally spawn in the wrong loadout or uniform, or forget to switch roles, or whatever. So maybe limit it to a couple respawns per game or something. But right now, people are using the respawn mechanic as a legitimate strategy, and I think that hurts the game. The devs even spent, close to a year trying to figure out how they were going to stop the mass redeploy on offensive garrison game loop that was hurting the game, and they now have a system that mitigates this, but I still think it's hurting the game more than benefiting it. But I'm sure there are different opinions out there on these answers, so go ahead and leave some comments. Just remember to keep it respectful down there. And finally, Zosohobo asks, what change do you want to see to the meta? That was pretty vague, so he gave me some specifics. He first asked about the node meta, and I think I pretty well covered that earlier. But this also ties in with this part of his question about the video that Sam15 has made. I recommend you all watch that, as it is pretty good, and I agree with about 90% of everything he says in that video. If you are newer to Hell Let Loose, then you probably don't know how this game was initially marketed to potential supporters. That marketing led a lot of people, myself included, to believe we were going to get a game that played closer to something like Postscriptum or Squad rather than Battlefield. While I do believe they've found a pretty good balance now, it's still lacking in some areas, and one of those areas is the overall resource part of the game. The original vision was something less like nodes and more like physical fuel dumps and ammunition stores that you'd actually have to string together in some strategic fashion to physically supply the soldiers and sustain the fighting at the front line. Like right now, most people hide the nodes and then they are this passive thing that they aren't thought about again. But what was originally built was a system that you could interact with and actually cut the availability of supplies and fighting materials off to your enemies, and it was something you were potentially going to have to protect, like an actual supply chain. Somewhere along the line, this was changed for one reason or another, and Sam's video really details what that system could have been, or maybe even still could be. So to get more insight on what we are talking about here, go watch that video. I'll link to it in the description. It's long, but it's very well done, and he does include timestamps. I see the topic of specialized squads come up every now and again, and part of me doesn't fully understand why, as I feel this is something you can already do. Unless people are wanting, say, more than one engineer in a logistics squad, or something like that. But every specialized squad that I can think of, you are already capable of organizing. I made a video here where we play a full match as a 3-man Logi squad, and it worked very well. Want an MG squad? Get a support player with the ammo carrier loadout, an engineer to build barricades or bunkers, maybe even a medic or a rifleman, and the squad leader can spot. AT squad, same thing. Support for supplies and explosives ammo, AT for rockets, mines, and AT guns, engineer for satchels, mines, Belgian gates. You can make assault squads with a focus on grenades and high volume of fire weapons. I've even organized armor support squads in the past, where we stick to a piece of armor and repair it, defend its flanks, build repair stations and barricades behind it if it's going to be sitting still for a while. I think specialized squads are pretty great and a lot of fun, but I also think that they can already be organized with the current way Hell Let Loose is set up. Being in a community really helps with this though, as I could see it being harder in a pure public setting. Maybe some more specific squad icons would help here a little bit. I think gunplay itself is pretty good. The weapons all feel good, and ballistics I think have been implemented well. I think they need to spend some more time on bullet penetration though. I don't think that anyone really knows what's going on for sure with that. I think there are probably a couple too many automatic weapons on the field at any given time, but I don't think it's just that bad. Would I prefer it with less? Yes. But it's not a hill I'm prepared to die on, unlike Hill 400 where all I seem to do is die. The camera in the chest, I mean, it's not my favorite design choice, but it is what it is, and it's that way for everyone, so I don't feel like it's a disadvantage to any one person or group. I guess that would be the silver lining there. Apparently that's kind of a common way to do it, as it makes designing the rest of gunplay elements easier to do, and being that this is Black Matter's first game, I'm not surprised they went this route. But if they ever do make like a Hell Let Loose 2 or something like that, I hope it's something they do change in the future. Unfortunately for this game, that's just how it's going to be. And lastly, what am I excited to see that's already planned? I have two answers. First is half tracks, but I do hope they do not use them as spawn points like they have suggested they might. Heroes and Generals does this, and you just end up with people driving them and hiding them somewhere instead of using them as an offensive weapon. It's an armored personnel carrier with an armored MG on it. It should be used as part of the tip of the spear and mobile support, not as a hidden spawn point. I also hope we get different variants, as I know at least the Germans tried to attach any gun they had laying around to these things. Second is the campaign. Having a couple or a few maps strung together and having resource and or equipment carryover from one match to the next is really exciting to me. They haven't given us too many details on how this is actually going to work, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully it gives the officers and commander especially more to think about in regards to longer term team management. That's all the questions. I hope you guys respond to my answers in the comments, and make sure you answer your own questions down there, as I'm curious as to what you guys think. If you missed the post about the AMA, that's okay. Feel free to ask a question in the comments and I'll try to give you an answer. They might be shorter than the ones I have in the video, but it's always fun to interact with viewers and subscribers here on the channel. 2,000 subscribers might not seem like a lot, you know, to some people, but I'm just super thrilled to have all of this support, and I think it means that you are all finding value in the content. I know I'm going to crack one open tonight and play some Hell Let Loose to celebrate, so I hope you do too. Special thanks to Zosohobo, Charles Whitman, Vodka Amas, Ollibolliskru, Gregory, Thijs Molenaar, About 641 Ninjas, mstrstrawx, Knowledge of Barbarossa, and Swisshost for the questions. And thanks to Wolf Enstein for the kind words and continuing support. Always a pleasure. Make sure to check the description for links to all the videos and other channels that I mentioned earlier in this video. Subscribe, leave a like, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thanks for helping the channel grow.